Did you finish moving? You're not going to back out, right? I'll be gone by the end of today. I'll miss you. Who's going to be my stress relief now? She said what she wanted to say and hung up the phone. I couldn't help but look forward to how quickly her bubbly mood would plummet. My name is Aria, and I'm 29 years old. I'm currently living in a high-rise apartment near Boston with my parents. Up until a year ago, I was married, but we divorced because of my husband's infidelity. I moved back in with my parents, who live in my childhood home. At that time, my family home was old and cramped, so we all agreed that it was a good time to move. Now we're all living in a more spacious high-rise apartment. I have an older brother named Samuel, who moved out of our family home quite a while ago. When we moved to the high-rise, Samuel said to me, "You're really crafty buying a high-rise apartment with your divorce settlement." But I didn't let that bother me. I've been living comfortably here with my parents. I have a job that allows me to work remotely, and so far, life has been pretty smooth. Samuel never visits home, and it seems like he doesn't even update our parents on his life. I know he's working somewhere, but the details are unclear. I occasionally call to update him about how things are going with our parents and me, but he always seems disinterested and ends the call quickly. To be frank, I question whether he's really acting like a responsible older son. But I never imagined that Samuel would soon bring an incredible problem into our lives. One day, my phone rang, and unusually, it was Samuel calling. Wondering what was going on, I answered the call. "Samuel, what's going on?" I asked, and Samuel sounded unusually smug. Well, I'm getting married soon," he said. Surprised, I couldn't help but blurt out, "What?" Samuel has always been single, and I've never heard him talk about any romantic relationships. So I had assumed Samuel would stay single forever. Who are you marrying?" "Someone from work. I'll bring her over on my next day off, so let mom and dad know. Later." Just like that, he hung up the phone. I stood there stunned for a moment, wondering what kind of woman would marry Samuel. I couldn't even begin to imagine. Samuel isn't exactly the nicest guy, and he's pretty reckless with money. Whoever she is, she'll have to be pretty strong-willed to put up with him. Well, he did say he'd bring her over on his next day off, so I guess I'll find out what she's like then. Mixed feelings of anxiety and concern, I waited for the next day off. On Sunday, Samuel showed up at our family home with his fiancée. "This is Scarlett, the woman I'm marrying." The soon-to-be my sister-in-law, Scarlett, had a flashy look that was complemented by her makeup. When introduced to me and my parents, she greeted us with a smile. "So, you must be Aria. I've heard a lot about you." What have you heard?" I asked, a bit taken aback. "Oh, various things," Scarlett said, with a suggestive smile. Something about that didn't sit well with me, and I couldn't shake that uneasy feeling afterward. But Scarlett and Samuel, after their cursory greetings to my parents, started saying, "Wow, was this high-rise apartment always this spacious?" "Right? What a fabulous high-rise." Scarlett seemed genuinely interested and began to explore various parts of the house. My parents were baffled by their behavior. After walking around the high-rise apartment, the couple eventually said, "See you later," and left. 3 days later, Samuel told me they had officially registered their marriage. Something didn't sit right with me. Despite all his talk about me being divorced and living alone at my parents' house, there were no signs that they would have a wedding ceremony. Given how much Samuel cares about his public image, I wondered why they wouldn't have a wedding. Samuel's had a steady job for years, and if Scarlett also works at the same company, they should have some savings. When I asked Samuel about it, he said, "We're just too busy right now. We plan to have the ceremony when things settle down." While I reluctantly accepted that explanation, what really bothered me was when Samuel said, "Be at home on your next day off. There's something important I need to discuss." Something about Samuel's important talk gave me a bad feeling, so I spent my day off filled with a sense of unease. On the next holiday, Samuel and Scarlett came over to my parents' house. Samuel, after brief pleasantries, started saying something outrageous. "Actually, we've been thinking about moving into this house." This caught both me and my parents, Thomas and Natalie, off guard. Scarlett, smiling, said, "Well, this house is so spacious, isn't it? There's a large, unused room. If you let us use that room, that would be enough. Wouldn't it be helpful for Thomas and Natalie to have people around who can assist with various things?" In a hurry, I said, that empty room is actually reserved for guests?" To which Samuel responded, "Guests? Do you even have guests in this house? From what I see, you're not using that room at all. It wouldn't be a problem for us to use it, right?" "But, Aria," Scarlet abruptly interrupted me by calling my name. Technically, you shouldn't even be living in this house, right? Do you think you have the right to refuse us moving in? Although Scarlet was smiling, her words were loaded with pressure. Was my bad feeling all along about this hidden malice in Scarlet? Even though neither my parents nor I had agreed, Samuel and Scarlet started moving their stuff into our home the very next day. In no time, the house was filled with Samuel and Scarlet's belongings. Well, moving all our stuff in does make it a bit cramped. Hearing Samuel mutter, Scarlet added, "Yeah, if only there were a spare room to put our stuff in." Oh wait, isn't there an empty room we could use? An empty room? Oh, you know the one. The room where Arya, who doesn't even work, spends all day doing nothing but sleeping. Basically a waste of space. Ah, got it. Their conversation and laughter reached my ears clearly from my bedroom. They must be saying it loud enough for me to hear on purpose. Scarlet, my sister-in-law, started to harass me more and more. Come mealtime, Scarlet would never miss an opportunity to hurl insults at me, like, "Isn't it embarrassing to hole up in this house at your age? Why don't you earn some money for a change?" I started eating meals in my room to avoid her. This only made me retreat to my room even more, which gave Scarlet more reason to treat me like trash. I assumed that since Samuel and his wife had moved in, they would be contributing to the household expenses, but it turns out they hadn't contributed a single dollar. Shocked, I said, "Shouldn't you give some money to Dad and Mom, being the eldest son and all?" Samuel and his wife retorted, "Who are you to talk? You're not doing anything either. You should be grateful we're even living with you." Well, if we give money to Thomas and the others, your living expenses will come out of that too, right? Why should we have to cover your costs? Besides, you're this old, divorced, unemployed, and still living with your parents? You can't even show your face in public. Aren't you ashamed? She wouldn't even entertain the idea. I sighed, realizing this was getting nowhere. Apparently, Samuel and his wife are keeping all their earnings to themselves. Later in the evening, just as I was about to take a shower, I had an unfortunate run-in with Scarlet. Scarlet said, "Excuse me, you're not thinking of going in before me, are you? Why should I have to go in after you?" I left without saying a word. Then Scarlet, feeling snubbed, shouted at my retreating back, "How long do you plan on mooching off this house? Just leave already! Stop being a parasite, you piece of trash!" At that moment, I finally made up my mind. Absolutely unforgivable. I heard from my parents that Samuel and his wife are going on a 1-week trip to Aspen, Colorado next week. Upon hearing the news, I thought, this is my chance. I informed Samuel and his wife that I would be moving out during their absence. Upon hearing this, Samuel and his wife said, "Finally leaving, huh? Make sure not to leave any junk behind. Get out quickly." "So, Arya, you're moving? Sad." "Just kidding, of course. It's about time. Having you around is like hosting toxic waste. Get out as soon as possible." They were ecstatic. Before telling Samuel and his wife about the move, I had made a proposal to my parents. Although they were initially surprised, they listened to me attentively. In the end, they agreed. Before moving out, I told Samuel and his wife that it would be necessary to transfer the deed for this high-rise apartment from my name to Samuel's. Samuel agreed without hesitation, and the process went smoothly. Now, all rights to this high-rise apartment belong to Samuel. Samuel and his wife left for their trip in high spirits. Alright, let's get this move on. I got started on my move, just as thrilled as Samuel and his wife had been. I moved all my belongings to my new place. In the meantime, I received a call on my cell from Scarlet. "Is the move done? You're not going to change your mind, right? I'll be out by the end of the day. I'll miss having you around, you know, as my stress reliever. Bye now." Scarlet hung up after getting her digs in. I couldn't help but look forward to seeing her go from euphoric to rock bottom when she returned. And so, the move went off without a hitch. Leaving that high-rise apartment did make me feel a bit sentimental, but it wasn't the same place where I had once lived happily with my parents. So I decided to start afresh and began unpacking in my new home. A week later, my cell phone rang. It was Samuel calling. I didn't answer. I already knew what he'd say. He kept calling, but eventually stopped when I continued to ignore him. However, soon after, I started receiving multiple calls from Scarlet. They just kept coming, one after another. Exhausted, I finally answered the phone. "Hello?" Scarlet was almost hysterical. "Wait, what's going on? Where are Thomas and the others? And what's with the rent on this high-rise apartment? What does Arya do for a living?" "Hold on, let's take this one question at a time," I said, letting out a big sigh. Scarlet then blurted out loudly over the phone, What do you mean? Where did Thomas and the others go? You mean Dad and Mom? They're here, living with me. They moved in willingly. They were fed up with you guys draining their pension. What about the furniture and appliances? Where did they go? I brought them with me. Everything belongs to me. I bought them. Didn't Samuel say to take everything and leave nothing behind? But there's nothing left here. How are we supposed to live in this house? You're both grown-ups. Buy your own living essentials. You do have jobs, don't you? And what about this high-rise apartment? Why is there a mortgage? Didn't you buy it outright with the settlement money from your divorce? That's just your misunderstanding. I put down a down payment and took out a loan for this high-rise apartment. I didn't receive a single dollar in divorce settlement money. I pay $1,000 a month for this apartment. What? $1,000? Every month? By the way, I have connections with the designer and the real estate agent at this high-rise, and they gave me a good deal. But now that I've transferred the property rights to Samuel, it would be rude to keep the price low. So starting next month, it's going to be a $35,000 monthly payment. $35,000? You must be kidding! Even if I had gotten money from the divorce settlement, there's no way I could buy such a nice, spacious, high-rise apartment in one go. You should be able to figure that out. Even over the phone, I could tell that Scarlett's face was turning pale. Samuel and his colleagues are well employed, so they can afford it. If they can't, they'll have to sell. But even that will probably put them in the red. What do you do exactly? You folks assumed that I was unemployed. I work as a designer in architecture, remotely. I can easily manage sudden relocations and even afford to buy a new high-rise apartment. What? Why did you keep quiet about all this? Just come back now! What are we supposed to do without your help? We'll let you live here with us! Scarlett kept yelling, still acting high and mighty. Even if you say that now, it's too late, you know. I could still hear Scarlett's loud voice, but I hung up the phone right then. Immediately after, I blocked both Samuel and Scarlett's numbers. From what I heard through the grapevine, Samuel and Scarlett were obsessed with gambling before they got married. It seemed they had sunk all their money into it. Because of that, they racked up a ton of debt and couldn't pay the rent for their fancy high-rise apartment. They were given eviction notices. They came to my high-rise apartment to beg for money from my parents. They assumed I had bought the whole place outright because it was so nice and concluded they wouldn't have to pay rent. So they moved in without asking. I had always wondered why those two show-offs never had a wedding. Turns out they wanted to, but couldn't afford it. Of course, they would spend their own salaries on gambling, leaving utility bills and other household expenses for my parents to cover, with their pension. It didn't stop there. They were even siphoning off my parents' pension money to fuel their gambling habit. Given that situation, it was a no-brainer for my parents to agree when I proposed that we distance ourselves from Samuel and his wife and move to a new high-rise apartment. We let go of the old place and purchased a new, comfortable high-rise apartment. What's more, this new high-rise was actually designed by me. Through some connections, we managed to buy it for a third of the price. We could even afford to pay it off all at once. No loan needed. Afterwards, I heard Samuel and Scarlett never paid the rent for the old high-rise and ended up selling it. But they're still stuck with the ongoing loan payments. Having lost their place to live, they've apparently moved to an old, cheap apartment. Despite their dire financial situation, they're still the type to care only about appearances. They still dress in what looks like luxury brands. So now they're living from hand to mouth, struggling with loans and debts every day. Apparently someone saw them a while back getting loads of bread crusts from a bakery. It's scary to even think about the kind of life they're living now. As for my parents and me, we're enjoying peaceful days. The new high-rise is comfortable, my job is going great, and life is smooth sailing. I've been getting calls from unknown numbers, probably Samuel or Scarlett, but I've ignored them. Just last week, I changed my mobile number. Now, I doubt I'll be hearing from Samuel or Scarlett anymore. I plan to continue enjoying calm days in this new setting, together with my parents.